Hello, everyone. I have some wonderful news to share today. Our school building project has successfully raised enough funds. I am truly, truly grateful to all of you. Thanks to your incredible support, our fund has reached its target. We collected over 180 million VND in donations and an additional nearly 53 million VND from paid workshops. This means we not only have enough to build the school, but we also have a surplus of nearly 22 million VND. This remaining amount will be transferred to another school location by the new M. Suckman 2000 organization. I want everything about this fundraising effort to be completely transparent, so please check the description section of this podcast episode. I've included a link to my Facebook post where you can find all the details. The podcast revenue transferred to the school building fund, a record of all your donations to the fund, and a link to the bank account statement used to collect workshop fees. All information is documented in that post, so if you need anything, please feel free to check it there. So that's just a quick update for you all, and once again, I genuinely thank each and every one of you. I never expected the fundraising process to be so quick, and I am incredibly touched by your support. Last September, we went to Dien Bien to start the school construction. In just about 2 or 3 more months, the teachers and students at the Hang Cho preschool will have a brand new school. I will share more updates with you then. The first night after I arrived in Dien Bien, I could barely sleep. My mind was racing, replaying everything that had happened that day. And the subsequent nights I spent in Dien Bien, I found myself wrestling with many thoughts and concerns. Today's episode isn't meant to have a clear message or anything. It's simply me wanting to share with my online friends the things that weigh on my mind, the things I witnessed. I feel compelled to tell these stories because I need you, I need someone to listen, and I need to express these feelings. Before embarking on this trip, I received a letter from my past self. For those who don't know, there's a website that allows you to send letters to your future self 5 years, 10 years, whatever time frame you choose. On August 28th, which is my birth date on my official documents, not my actual birthday, I received a letter from my past self, sent in 2019. The reason I chose August 28th was because my 19-year-old self thought that by the age of 23, I'd be working an office job, and my company would celebrate employees' birthdays according to their official birth dates. My fake birthday would be a day surrounded by people, full of attention, lively, and joyous. So, this letter arrived like a birthday greeting, along with a few other things. I wrote a lot of things in that letter. I won't share all of it here. But there was one part that I read and was completely taken aback. I had written that after all the achievements I listed above in the earlier part of the letter, I hoped to marry a rich husband. After that, I would be able to open some kind of shop without caring about profit or loss. And when my children were a little older and could take care of themselves, my husband and I would open an educational fund, a fund to develop education for Vietnamese children. Yes, that was my dream. I was so surprised because I genuinely didn't remember ever having such dreams. It was like discovering a younger version of myself, and at the same time, seeing how much I've grown since I had those aspirations. You've probably heard this a million times, but I need to recount it so you understand why I had those dreams. Both my father and mother are from Ha Tin, and both sides of my family were very poor. My mother's side lived in an incredibly difficult rural area, a remote mountainous commune. The land was so barren, dogs eat rocks and chickens eat pebbles, as the saying goes. No matter how hard they worked, it yielded little, and every year there were countless floods. If people didn't die, all the savings they had accumulated would be swept away by the floodwaters. That's why my mother's hometown was so impoverished. In my mother's generation, just having enough food to survive was a struggle, let alone sending children to school. So, people of her generation typically stopped schooling around 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade. At most, they'd finish middle school. It was truly rare for someone like my mother to finish 12th grade. My maternal grandparents genuinely tried so hard that they had no food to eat, no sandals to wear. They had to walk barefoot on steel train tracks to get to school, bleeding, but they couldn't afford shoes. Yet, they saved money to pay for their children's tuition, and all of my maternal grandparents' children got to go to school. They were one of the few families in that village who could send their children to school. My grandparents believed that only through education could their lives change. Even with diligent farming, agriculture was very primitive back then, and with constant storms and natural disasters, they could never earn enough to eat. It was only by getting an education and securing a government job with a salary that they could have money. When my mother finished 12th grade, her hometown was too poor, and she had to go to Dien Bien alone to continue her studies and become a teacher. My mother told me that for over a decade before that, she had never stepped beyond the bamboo hedges of her village. Every child is curious about the world, and my mother yearned to step out into it. She felt that it was precisely because of her studies, because she finished 12th grade and could pursue higher education, that she was able to go to the South. It was when she went to the South that she met my father, married him. Both my parents came from poor families and had to take care of their own small family while also supporting their younger siblings' education. So, our family was never in severe hardship, but we were never affluent either. However, my parents raised me like a child from a well-off family, meaning they invested an enormous amount in my education. And so, this accumulation across generations, from my mother's generation, she was educated more than her peers and found a more comfortable job. Then, in my generation, I accumulated a little more, received more education, traveled more, and stepped out into the world more. Because my family's background is like that, they saw education as a stepping stone. That's why they highly revered education, extremely so. Because when people achieve what they want through a certain method, they truly consider that method to be the formula for success. And for my family, education was indeed their formula for escaping poverty. I think I have always been educated to remember my privilege. I have the privilege of learning. I've had a tremendous amount invested in my education, truly a lot. Compared to our economic situation and family background, I genuinely received a lot of investment in my studies. And compared to my family's original starting point, meaning going back to my grandparents' generation, my family has truly come a long way from that route, and all of it is thanks to education. That's why almost every member of my family extremely reveres learning and education. So, the mindset, the idea that one must invest in education, that one must develop education, has always been within me. But when I was little, I didn't know that. When I read this letter, I suddenly remembered, oh, so I used to have that dream. I had a dream that when I was around 40 or 50, when my children were a bit older, my husband and I would open a scholarship fund. Now here's the interesting part. I realized two things here. It seems that all children are probably the same. People often say, human nature is inherently good from birth. Meaning, when they are born, every child is kind and good. They also have beautiful dreams and aspirations for the world, for the community. I don't know about you, but when I was little, a common game among kids in my village was to ask each other, if you had 3 wishes right now, what would you wish for? Almost every child would have a wish to save the world, to make everyone happy, to change this or that for the world, for the community. And then, as they grow a little older and realize that their own strength isn't that great, that they can only make changes within a manageable scope, their dreams become a bit more modest. They might want to be a district chairman or a company director. And then, when they're fully grown like us, like me and everyone listening to this podcast now, they'll have a super ordinary dream. Okay, I just need to take good care of myself, have a good life, and take care of my closest loved ones. That's enough. I don't have lofty dreams anymore. And I was the same. In the process of growing up, many things eroded my dreams until I received that letter from my past self, and I remembered, oh, I once dreamed of opening an education fund. I tried to rewind the past 5 years to see what had changed me, or what had happened in those 5 years, and if I had truly pursued that dream of mine. I think consciously, in terms of consciously knowing what I was doing, I didn't remember to pursue that dream. But unconsciously, I was always doing it. I don't know if I've ever told you this on the podcast, but ever since I started earning money, which was around my 2nd year of university, I've been putting money aside to support my cousin's education. My cousin isn't struggling to the point of starvation or thirst, but because she lives in the countryside, her family can only afford school tuition, food, and clothes. If she wants higher needs, like extra classes, which are difficult to afford, I'm the one who helps her in those aspects. I pay for her extra classes, buy her reference books. And if she needs learning tools like a calculator, not a laptop, but a Casio-type calculator, I'll help with that. So, I reflected and realized that I have been supporting my cousin for years because I believe that education can change a child's life. As I've told you in a billion previous podcast episodes, education has helped me, how learning has opened up new horizons for me. So, that's a value I deeply revere, and I've always applied it with my cousin. More recently, I opened the school building fund. I just kept doing these things without really thinking about it. But when I received this letter, I finally understood, so that's it. Somehow, I was still pursuing those dreams. And then there's another funny thing. Wasn't the first part of my dream wanting to marry a rich husband, open a shop, and then later, my husband and I would open an education fund? The reason I wanted a rich husband was so I could open a shop without worrying about profit or loss. I know when you hear this part, you'll probably feel conflicted, thinking, why does she have such a dependent mindset? Why does she think she needs to rely on a man to build her life? But please, forgive an 18 or 19-year-old girl because she was raised on too many romance novels. And somehow, I feel that my dream at that time was quite complete. The shop I mentioned in that letter is quite similar to the model I'm working on now. Meaning, I'm building my social media channels, right? If you consider this a form of business, I'm essentially monetizing my reputation. For example, when brands book me to advertise their products or services, they're essentially buying my reputation, so it's quite similar to the shop concept. As for opening an education fund, I haven't opened one yet, but compared to the income I earn, I'm investing quite a lot in education, not for myself, but for others. And I'm doing all of this without needing any man at all. I can do these things on my own. I don't know if I've been rambling on, because this episode doesn't have a script. It's just something I felt I needed to tell you immediately. So I don't know if I'm being hard to understand, but my point is that this is the journey from a young girl who wanted to rely on others, to a girl who can live independently and build her own life without needing another person to make that life complete. I actually mentioned this in a previous podcast episode about love. I really like an episode where Sister Thai Min talked about a girl who loved a man very much, but she had to go explore the world alone. So she told him she was going to explore the world and they would temporarily stop being together for a while. After she came back from exploring her own world, she told him, "It's not that I can't live without you, but I prefer my life with you in it." Meaning, even without him, she would still go explore the world alone. She would still have her own life. But if he existed in her life, she would feel very happy. I feel incredibly happy that I'm gradually moving towards that image, that concept of life. I don't think I'm completely there yet, but I'm very, very happy that I'm making progress towards that. For many years, I haven't watched Korean dramas. I mean, the idol drama type, not K-pop idol dramas, but the genre that only tells stories about two characters just falling in love. I'm not talking about political dramas or other dramas with different content. But in recent years, I haven't enjoyed watching Korean or Chinese romance dramas much anymore. Because I don't like it when they create a ridiculously awkward situation for the main character, and at the beginning of the show, she's perfectly capable, handling her life well. Then, suddenly, a huge problem arises, and she always needs a man to appear and fix things for her. I really dislike that trope. It's as if women truly need men to accomplish what they want. Although I know that no one in this world can overcome massive, huge challenges all by themselves. They need partners, they need people to help them get through it. But I don't like the exclusive focus on that person having to be their lover. I don't like the idea that films reinforce the image of women depending on men. I mean, I don't dislike or reject people who are helped by their partners. If you receive that kind of support, I'm happy for you. And honestly, if I had a boyfriend who was willing to support me, willing to help me grow, I would be overjoyed, incredibly happy. But my point is, oh gosh, I don't know how to say this clearly without being hated. But my point is, I'm very happy that I can build my own life without being like that 18-year-old girl who had dreams and thought the way to achieve them was to marry a rich husband. That's what my 18-year-old self thought. My 18-year-old self wanted to open her own shop, wanted to open an education fund, and I thought I would achieve those things not by my own effort, but by marrying a rich husband who would love me, cherish me, and take care of those things for me. So my point now is that I have changed, and I can build my own independent life. And if I do marry a rich husband and he helps me do those things, that's even better. But if that doesn't happen, it's okay too, it doesn't matter. That's my point. I'm not saying all girls have to be strong, all muscular, and live without men. I don't need love. That's not what I mean. Love, if you want to love, love. Dependence and everything, that's all okay. But you also need to build your own life, so that if they leave, your life remains stable, not like your world just crumbles. As I thought about building my own independent life, I remembered a book I once read about toxic independence. Independence comes in many forms, and one of them is toxic independence. This is quite a lengthy topic, so I'll save it for a future episode to discuss with you all. Now let's get back to the main point, the things I pondered and lost sleep over when I went to Dien Bien. Firstly, about my dream coming true. Secondly, about how lucky I realized I was in how I was born, how I grew up, and how my family educated me. All these things, when I went to Dien Bien, made me truly grateful for everything I've experienced in my life. We stayed in an incredibly deprived area, everyone. The road up to our school site was a dirt path, incredibly steep. I think that slope must have been 45, 50, 60, even 70 degrees. It was practically vertical, extremely steep. Lan and I couldn't even walk it ourselves, the villagers had to drive us. The dirt road was tiny, and on one side was a sheer drop. When it rained, the teachers at this preschool would have to walk up to the school site, walking on that steep, tiny dirt road because motorbikes couldn't pass. When I finally reached the school site and saw the old school, I felt tears welling up. But there were too many people there, so I had to hide behind the school to cry. Seeing everything there, I realized that normally I live out of sight. These things aren't directly in front of me, and if they appear on TV, I only watch them through a video. But here I was actually there, witnessing those scenes, immersing myself in that life, and suddenly tears fell. And even though they live in such difficult circumstances, the children here are so adorable. They are so sweet. We bought some gifts, some snacks, some milk for them. They received them so joyfully. On the wooden walls, though, they were more like wooden planks making up the walls. The children didn't have chalk to draw. They used charcoal, black charcoal, to draw pictures on the walls to play. The playground toys, the seesaw, were just made of bamboo sticks. The teacher told us that when it's cold, many children don't even have pants to wear, and not enough warm clothes either. So many of them turn pale, and the teachers often bring warm clothes from their own homes for the children, or they light fires to warm them up. Hearing about these situations, I don't know how to describe it, but I think as you listen to me tell these stories, you're probably feeling the same emotions I felt when I heard the teachers' accounts. And then I thought, why have I received so much luck? I get to go to school, I make podcasts with your support, I make TikToks with viewers, I do this and that. And I think I've received so much, I truly need to do something. And I thought, well, if I don't have a lot of money right now, I have an entire community. I have all of you, just like with building the school this time. You truly helped me a lot. If it were just me doing it alone, who knows how long it would take to finish that school. In some of my earlier podcast episodes, I used to tell everyone that I was afraid of becoming famous, afraid of controversies and whatnot. But now I think, oh darling, being famous isn't easy, you know? It's not like you just decide to be famous and it happens. I'm not really famous or super popular right now either. Although, I'm not even trying to control my fame anymore. I'm letting everything happen naturally, but I'm not famous anyway. It's not easy to be famous. Now I won't try to stop it anymore. Because the more famous I become, the larger my community will be, and my community will be able to help more people. I really hope that my next school projects will continue to receive help from everyone, because I guess you'll be like me. Because if you're like me in some ways, then you'll continue to accompany me, right? After we finished our work at the school site and the groundbreaking ceremony, my sister Lan and I returned to Dien Bien City to visit some historical sites. And as you know, right when we arrived in Dien Bien City, a storm hit Vietnam, and many sad things happened, as we saw on the news. Actually, the storm didn't directly hit Dien Bien. Dien Bien was only affected. Throughout those days, we took the opportunity to visit all the historical relics in Dien Bien. When I was visiting with Lan, I learned something very interesting. Lan always hoped that there would be a tour guide at every historical site so they could analyze the historical stories for us. When we went, for some reason, the tour guides in Dien Bien had to attend a training session, so we had to visit each site at least 3 times to get a guide to listen to. And honestly, honestly, if you have the opportunity, you really should visit Dien Bien and its historical sites and listen to the tour guides. Because you will feel 1,000 times more love for the blood flowing in your veins, for our country Vietnam, and for our people. You will feel tremendously proud to be Vietnamese. Just recently, at the museum, they made a film about the Dien Bien Phu victory. And that film was made with AI, because it's not easy now to find actors who look like Uncle Ho, General Jayap, or the French generals. So they made the film using AI. The characters looked a little stiff, but they were very realistic, I swear. Lan and I watched that film and we both cried. We cried uncontrollably from beginning to end. I remember when I was in school, I think in elementary, middle, or high school, we learned about the Dien Bien Phu victory. But we only learned numbers and facts. When we visited the museum, the historical sites, and heard the stories told in a storytelling style, that's when I truly understood how extraordinary our ancestors were. The Dien Bien Phu victory was not just a military victory, it was a symbol of the strength of the Vietnamese people. When the French established their base in Dien Bien Phu, they were truly confident. They believed that with their superior weapons and powerful forces, they could suppress the resistance spirit of our army and people. But they greatly underestimated our patriotic spirit. Initially, they thought Dien Bien was too far from the lowlands, just the journey for our militia, who had to march on foot, and there were no proper roads then, only jungles, from Hanoi, without food supplies. They didn't have planes for transport like the French army. They thought we would surely starve to death before we could even fight. But they never imagined that our people had, bicycles that could carry up to 300 kg of rice. One bicycle could transport up to 300 kg of rice to the battlefield, everyone. Meaning, the transporters didn't even eat the resistance rice themselves. They did everything they could not to touch that rice, traveling a long distance from Hanoi to Dien Bien, and still managed to bring several hundred kilograms of rice per bicycle to the soldiers on the battlefield. They also couldn't believe our army could dig tunnels. Digging tunnels in the dark, everyone. Digging tunnels deep underground with blinding dust, over 500 kilometers of tunnels. Can you imagine? Over 500 kilometers of tunnels? And they also couldn't have imagined that there would be heroes who would use their own bodies to block cannon barrels so the cannons couldn't fire, accepting to be torn to shreds for that. And they would never have imagined that there would be heroes who would rather sacrifice themselves utterly, just to protect a cannon for our soldiers. And they would never have imagined that our army would truly fight day and night like that. During those days and nights when bombs shook the sky over Dien Bien, our ancestors' generation fought not just for duty, but for love of family, homeland, and country. And every gunshot was a promise to protect the freedom of future generations. Every battle was a step closer to the dream of the entire nation, a dream of independence and freedom. And to achieve that dream, a shared dream of our entire nation, countless people fell on the battlefield without a word of farewell. At the end of our journey, after visiting all the historical sites, my sister and I went to the Martyrs' Cemetery. When I entered the cemetery, I couldn't stop crying, everyone. Almost all the graves in the cemetery were anonymous, because how many people were whole when they died? Furthermore, during wartime chaos, it was impossible to identify the names of those who had passed away. The graves were almost all anonymous. And there would be a long stone tablet where the names of the fallen soldiers were inscribed. That tablet stretched for hundreds of meters from one end to the other. Names were written densely, packed with the names of fallen soldiers. I read those stone tablets and I cried, I kept sobbing. Because in my family, my grandfather's brother also sacrificed his life on the battlefield, and his name has not been found until today, written densely on a very tall stone tablet that stretched for hundreds of meters, everyone. It made my heart ache to see it. So truly, everyone, we really need to visit historical sites. We need to learn about history to know how extraordinary our nation has been. I truly feel incredibly proud. Do you remember in the 2023 year-end summary episode, I told you about working at a foreign corporation and how I initially struggled intensely at the company, and then my American boss used to talk to me? Do you remember that episode? I tried very hard to improve myself. Then one day, just chatting casually, I told my boss, do you know how smart I am when I speak Vietnamese? A few days later, we were talking again, and my boss said to me, "It's been a long time since I met someone as resilient as you. I don't know why you're so tough, and I don't understand why whatever you do, you always have to see it through to the end." I still remember what I said to my boss then, because I'm Vietnamese. We are the only nation that has been continuously invaded for over 1,000 years, constantly attacked, but in the end, we still regained independence. We still have our own culture, still preserved very Vietnamese characteristics, still preserved our culture, still regained independence, still regained our country, and we are also the only country in the world to defeat the two strongest countries at the time, France and America. So, because I am Vietnamese, that's why I am like this. Because in my genes, in my blood, there is already that resilient spirit, that fighting spirit. Whenever a situation triggers my warrior mode, I will become a true warrior. I remember saying that then. So now, when I revisit these historical sites, these museums, and hear the stories told by the tour guides, I feel truly, truly wonderful, and I am proud. I am 1,000 times proud to be Vietnamese. Throughout my days in Dien Bien, the first thing that bothered me and made me lose sleep was the dream of the previous generation, the dream of our ancestors for independence. In my era, I asked myself, what is our generation's dream? And when I looked at the children of Dien Bien, the children at the school site where we broke ground, I couldn't sleep that whole night. And I wondered, will the dreams of these children, the things they drew on the wooden walls with charcoal, will those dreams ever come true? Because their dreams are very simple. They dream of becoming teachers, doctors, police officers. So that night in Dien Bien, that night I stayed awake until early dawn. And I stood on the edge of tomorrow, asking what dreams would survive until morning. Once again, I want to express my gratitude to everyone. I don't know how to convey the depth of my thankfulness to all of you. Normally, I often say that you are like my online friends, right? But now I feel like our friendship has deepened even further as we have joined hands to do more things together. And I am truly, truly incredibly grateful for your companionship. So I just want to say thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next podcast episodes. Goodbye and see you again.